Alex.
Toby. Sam.
It was like he came alive and just.
Awesome.
Hey, Yappers. Can we get together? I want to. Yappers. Can I get a picture with you guys?
Sure.
Oh, they're here, baby.
You protest with an like what?
That music's actually not that bad.
Over here, folks. Come on over here.
Music's not that bad. Here.
Do we all fit?
2, 1. Celebrate freedom.
Actually, kind of catchy. That's a good way to protest.
Where can I get your mixtape?
Yeah, I think we should.
No, I want to take a picture with them. Why?
I'm videoing.
Don't like.
Don't get out of them.
No, we're just saying. We'll get there.
Where can I get your mixtape?
Get mine. He's a good singer.
Where can I get that mixtape, bro?
I'll send it to you guys.
Are you on Spotify?
We're still waiting on. There are a few more chapters coming up. Marquette's driving down, and a few other people. Yeah. So I see they're singing. I kind of want to start singing. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Good job. USA. We'll have to practice that a little bit more.
Yeah, you're a little off.
Good job, folks.
I gotta say, he is a better singer.
Where can I get your mixtape, bro? Are you on Spotify?
I see some more. Howdy, howdy. Welcome. Is this Wisconsin as well? Yeah. Hey, what's up, man? Blake told me you guys to come in. This is, so also with you guys, this is College of Lake County. Not too far from you guys, about 2.5 hours. So they're all here too.
Cool. You guys are all part of that.
Yeah. Big YAF fan.
Just JC something, I forgot.
Oh, we probably got about 100 something.
Desperate, I think.
We got a couple rows reserved.
I reserved the room at school for Clayman.
Yeah. That's perfect. Is that perfect? Perfect.
Yeah. Well, you have rows reserved.
Rows, yeah. For YAF.
Okay. I didn't know because like we have a theater that holds like 450, but it's not available.
That would be.
I heard you guys went down
to
what was it, a concert last year?
It's better to always shoot a little smaller because you say you have 100 people to show up. They're standing, and it's just psychological. Like, if you have a room with 500 people, the room's like 2,000.
Jacob. That's okay. What's Jacob doing?
100, or maybe a room that sits 60 and you have 70. People like, they do stuff. They fill rooms.
Yeah, they gave us like it's one of like our smart rooms they call it.
Yeah.
But it's like a it's like a real college.
Yeah.
You know, like our class.
Yeah.
Awesome. So awesome.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is perfect.
What did they say to you, Jacob?
They didn't say anything.
They didn't say anything?
Kill you with science.
Are you guys in line? Are you guys in line?
No, sir.
No, go ahead.
You have burned alive in your head. The
Yeah. They want to put my head on a pike in their heads.
It's good to have you guys here.
I was not missing this for the world. I love Cheney.
Oh, man.
You know what?
It is great. I strongly recommend when you have a long day or a big event coming up, Dave and Buster's.
What is this?
Oh, it was great. That was great. So you know I met you.
Long and hag. What is the hag? What is that?
I've been to Culver's twice, and I am a big fan.
Yeah, get those numbers up.
Culver's hasn't made it to Ohio yet.
Or you can move on.
What's the little paper?
You mean Ohio?
Real America. Yeah, sure.
No, they're not rowdy. They're just protesting.
Don't get me wrong, I love Wisconsin. I can't talk bad about it. My parents were truth I also enjoy Michigan too.
You guys gotta have a Culver Friday.
If they make it down to Virginia,
Yeah.
that's the problem, guys. You know what? Hey, when somebody here graduates, one of you guys with a business degree, you start and you open up the you open up a chain of Culvers down in Virginia. If I'm opening a Culvers and putting on the UW campus,
Yeah.
Oh, I want to assume.
Oh, crap.
Capitol Hill.
be good, be good.
Be good.
Yeah. Well, these guys have been like seriously awesome because about 6 months ago.
I was just going to say, like, who do you think is going to win the Democrat primary candidacy?
Who's your guys' choice?
Like,
Yeah.
like if you guys had to choose, who would you pick?
I don't think it really matters.
Really?
You're gonna beat Trump like a drum.
But-
you're gonna get impeached before that even happens.
Okay.
Who's gonna
no,
do
I'm,
it?
I'm
We'll
just
see
saying,
how
like, who
that
do you
one,
think
I'm
would
not
be
sure.
the front runner?
Right now, you watch the news. Who is the front runner?
Joe Biden?
Actually, no.
No?
No.
Warren?
I think it's.
Warren?
I actually heard Harris or
So
Clinton.
you guys don't have any policy preferences among the DNC?
It's not
Well,
what you
no,
asked.
I'm saying who would you
asked,
want?
who
Who
is
would
the
you
front
want
runner?
as the front
I
runner?
told you. Let's just go take a hike. How about that?
Okay, man. We're just
I don't know what to do with you people.
What do you mean, you people?
You heard me.
Oh, sorry.
Hey man, we're just here.
Did I say something offensive?
We're just here.
What you want?
We're just here, man. There's no being hostile.
I'm not being hostile. I'm just telling you like it is.
You said take a hike. I'd say that's hostile.
Well, you can take hostile all you want. Okay. I can speak my mind. It's like
I really like your singer, man. Dude, you got a great.
Yeah, that was amazing.
How long have you been playing guitar?
Well, all my life.
All your life? You're really talented.
Did you take any music classes, like guitar classes or anything, or self-taught?
No, self-taught.
Self-taught. Do you have albums? I'd listen to you.
Oh, good.
Like, cause all the Hollywood musicians are all liberal anyway. Doesn't matter.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have fun tonight.
You
okay?
too, man. Hey, thanks for being so nice. Nice talking.
Have a good time.
Everybody's coming back here with a black guy. Thank you.
One guy said to take a hike.
I just asked him who you guys thought was the front
Well, we are the welcoming committee for people coming by. So when these people come by, we're like, hey, welcome, thanks for coming. YAF loves you. YAF loves you.
We love everyone.
I love you. Except commies.
I mean, as long as they're not trying to beat me up.
I'll back you up.
I wish I brought a stand.
Yes, you really want to.
I was about to say it.
Yes.
Heritage.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Were you a little scared there?
No, I wanted to ask him why.
The American Enterprise Institute is another good thing.
AEI Enterprise. You're not gonna get out.
Yeah.
I wanted to see who they support. It looks like they don't really care who they support as long as it's not Trump.
Yeah, we went to the.
That's what they
talked to
said.
Glenn Beck.
They said we don't really care. It doesn't matter as long as it's not
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for coming.
with them. That would be kind of
Bless you.
hard.
Yeah. God bless you, sir, son.
Thanks. By the way, Juana says hi.
Juana says hi?
Tell her I said hello. Please do.
Are you recording this now?
Yeah.
I recorded some too.
You should put it on our channel.
I will.
show you
I just wish I brought my stand though.
Our interaction.
She's fighting for freedom.
Yeah, I've been recording.
When I think someone else
I've been
did.
recording for 10 minutes.
I wouldn't mind having a.
Just, I kind of have another conversation with you.
Hey man, are you the video cameraman for the event or something? Or are you just doing it for
He's
fun?
documenting for fun.
That's cool, man. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate you. Are we waiting around for somebody afterwards?
You guys can go in if you want. I'm just hanging out. I want to make sure people feel welcome.
Yeah.
And happy that other people are here. It's good to have YAF on campus. Let them
More the
know
merrier,
freedom
man.
is strong.
Where's
that?
More the merrier, man.
Absolutely.
Where's my gum?
I'm just gonna
Did
put
you
my
lose
head
your
in there
gum?
really quick though, just to make sure all is set. I'll be right back out.
See you, Kyle.
See you, Kyle. Kyle.
What do you think about Scientology?
Dude, like I went like this, and the guy literally backed up. Like I was like,
Are you Scientologist over here?
I was like, I don't bite. I mean, they have to bite first.
Hey man, that's how it goes. What?
The guy with the camera. Awkward. They follow you around silently, and that's what they do.
You ever seen like Scientology? They follow around the people.
Scientology.
Yeah, they follow around people that like.
It's
Still
like that.
recording?
Yeah.
It's like that Black Mirror.
I'm-
White Bear. Where
I'm going as long as it
they
goes.
don't actually say anything. Oh, that episode was messed up.
I don't think Dick Cheney was an imperialist.
What'd you say, Rob?
CCLM.
CCLM.
Community College Lives Matter.
Go ahead, guys.
All right.
Hey, thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
And don't leave at the end until we get another group picture of everybody.
Cool.
Thank you.
We'll get Beloit YAF in there too.
Well, thanks for keeping everyone safe. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
4 people. You guys are all Beloit YAF today.
What time does it start at?
7 o'clock.
6:35.
Close enough.
No.
Isn't Joe Biden the front runner? Isn't
No,
Joe Biden the
Joe
front runner?
Joe Biden's
Sort of.
dropping.
Not really. Is he dropping?
He's going
He's
off.
dropping, bro. He sucks.
He's dropping.
Yeah, you made it wrong.
You should.
Yeah.
What exactly? What's the red one say? What does it say? Solidarity forever.
Solidarity for Iraq.
No, it says forever.
No, it says for Iraq.
No, it says forever.
On the bottom. It says
On the red one.
Oh, on the bottom it says solidarity for Iraq.
Oh.
I don't know. Iraq is being run by a fucking mass murderer.
It's okay.
Single file line.
Oh.
Make it easier. Okay. I think we don't lose anything yet.
I think we'll eventually get.
Did we split up?
Let's hold on for a second because it's kind of crammed right there. Yeah, so he's waiting for.
My hands are cold. Yeah.
I guess the rain doesn't help, huh?
Yeah.
Not at all.
Did you already get these persons? You check your umbrella inside the door.
Yeah, he said take a hike.
Just like, hey man, what's happening?
Yeah, you guys were pretty civil.
You know where you're sitting?
No, that's what I was gonna ask.
Okay. Do you know where you're sitting? Oh, okay, never mind.
I was kidding. Honest. Okay.
What was that? I think
Boston, I'll be right back.
Hang on 1 second.
But it was kind of.
One of you guys wants to sit here if you have a working camera. That way you can take pictures.
Are you sure? All right.
You can take pictures.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Okay,
So, yeah, you take that spot. We got to save 2 spots.
Like I have, that's all I have. I'm speechless.
Chairman of the Beloit College Young Americans VP Chapter. We started our club in fall of 2017 and since then we've hosted a number of speakers, including Harvey Mansfield, former U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft, constitutional scholar Peter Berkowitz, Eric Prince, and Heather McDonald, and more on top of that. It's my distinct honor to introduce this evening's program featuring former Vice President Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney has spent the last 40 years of his life in public service, and his services included being Chief of Staff in the post-Watergate administration of Gerald Ford, 10 years in Congress as Wyoming's sole representative, and Secretary of Defense during the first Bush administration. During the 90s, he was CEO of the Halliburton Company, and was tapped by George W. Bush and a candidate to serve as his running mate. Mr. Cheney is an elder statesman, and his perspective is welcome on American politics and value. Moderating this discussion will be Governor Scott Walker. Former governor of this great state, Governor Walker campaigned as a reformer and then did something rare and kept his word when he won. The governor's tenure was marked by unprecedented prosperity in the state, and it is a distinct honor to have him this evening. Following the moderated section of the Q&A with Governor Walker, Vice President will be happy to take your questions. If you have a question for the Vice President, please. They will be read by the governor for everyone to hear. Your name and phone number will be kept private, and the only thing that will be read aloud is your question. Because we have a limited amount of time tonight, we may not be able to answer everybody's question. We will do our best. You can feel free to start submitting your questions anytime during tonight's program. So with that, please welcome former Vice President Dick Cheney, former governor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It is good to see you all here tonight. If it was still, if the Brewers were still in the playoffs, I might be actually have to confess that I might be watching the game on this iPad. Tonight, as you just heard from Andrew, in just a few minutes, hopefully. Otherwise, I'll be filling in for the whole hour. But I'm going to ask a few questions, but the rest of the time we're going to have populated up on the on this iPad a little bit of the questions that you're all asking and others are asking. That'll be asking the Vice President. As you heard, Andrew talked about how to submit those, and again, I'll be doing my best to be technology savvy. But thanks to Beloit College, and thanks to the YAF Chapter for hosting us here. For me, it's kind of a homecoming, Mr. Vice President, because I grew up down the way of Beloit. In fact, my first homecoming date was at the Butterfly Inn, which is just on the freeway on the way over here. It looks about the same. I was there recently, the day back when I went on my homecoming date a long time ago from Belvedere High School, but it's great to be here. And in that respect, I think people might be surprised knowing what they hear about the media and even the brief introduction. You have some pretty interesting Wisconsin roots that most people might not be aware of. So before I ask you some tougher questions, maybe fill us in a little bit on that and give some insights.
All right, Scott. Well, I'm delighted to be here. When I first came, I would never have been permitted to sit on the stage with the governor of Wisconsin. And I showed up here in January of 1966. I was a graduate student. The reason I was here, I just finished a master's degree in Wyoming. And then I was selected for an internship, a paid internship, to work for the governor of Wisconsin. And so we came up here, we had my wife with me, and she went to work on her PhD at Wisconsin in English. And I signed on and went to work for Warren Nobles. Great guy. But I spent the year 1966 working with him. We traveled all over the state. I had two major responsibilities. The governor would ride in the back. The highway patrolman driving, and over here on the right-hand side, in the passenger seat, I was the, I guess, riding shotgun. And I had two jobs. One was to pass out "We Like It Here" buttons. The governor had these buttons with sharp deal on the back, but it was a slogan of economic development and so forth, and we like Wisconsin. And wherever we went, I carried pocketfuls of them, and I'd reach in and pass them out to everybody. Still got scars from my thumbs. And my other job was to run the Polaroid camera. Now, our students probably don't even know what a Polaroid camera is. It didn't exist in those days. It was new technology. But it was something you carried around, snap a picture of the governor with the voter, rip out the paper, and hand the paper to the voter. And they had to figure out how to get it out to where it was useful. But I left paper all over the state of Wyoming. County fairs, football games, everywhere in the 66 campaign. But I learned a lot in Wisconsin. The governor couldn't have been better for me to work. One of the things he taught me, every time we'd hit town, we'd always go, sometimes stop at the radio station, local radio station, or go into the weekly newspaper. But he also went to the barber shop. And I asked him one day, I said, "Governor, I understand there's a radio station. Why do we go to the barber shop?" He said, "Look, Dick," he said, "every guy in town has to get his hair cut. And you want the barber saying nice things about it." And, several years later, when I was campaigning for Congress in Wyoming, I went to the barber shop. So I learned a lot. I later on had the opportunity to work for Bill Steiger. Bill was a great friend, and he was just a couple years older than I was, but he was the youngest member of Congress. And Bill became a great friend when I ran for Congress several years later after a stint with President Ford. I was running in Wyoming, and Bill had an easy race that year, and he did something very nice for a politician. He got his contributors to send checks to me in Wyoming, which really helped. I was the only member of my class who finished in the black that year. So Wisconsin has a special place in our heart. After my year with the governor, I went to work on my PhD at the University of Wisconsin and did all my coursework, passed my prelims, and I was scheduled to come back here after spending a year in Washington. Unfortunately, I got hired in Washington, ran into a guy named Don Rumsfeld, and then another guy named Jerry Ford, and I never did get back to finish my PhD. Academia is probably better for it.
Lynn got hers, right?
Lynn got hers. She got her degree here. She was here just a few weeks ago, participating in the panel at the university. So, also, the other important thing that happened here was our first child was born in Madison in the spring of '66, summer '66. She's now the congressman from Wyoming, and the third ranking Republican in the House is chairman of the Republican caucus. She's got my old job. So that all started right here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Good things happen here. And you're right about Governor Knowles. Governor Thompson was a good friend and still is a good friend of mine. We talk about the gentleman, Governor Knowles was. He actually started, of all things, the very first governor's fishing opener. That was Governor Knowles loved fishing along the way. Well, we're glad to be here, glad with a mix of folks, and I'll keep looking here in a minute as these questions start coming in. But I'm curious, this right now is an extraordinary time in America and in the world. And we could touch on that for hours on end, but I'm particularly interested because of your background, not only as Vice President, but obviously years before that as the Secretary of Defense and your positions on this, but talk a little bit about what's going on in the world with Syria, with Turkey, and with the Kurds in particular, because the discussion on this these days isn't necessarily one that follows a partisan or even an ideological trend. It's kind of all over the map, and I'd love to know your insights on that.
Sure. Well, it's an important set of issues, and it's a part of the first thing, obviously, conclude after you start to look at it is it's really a complex part of the world and a complex problem. I first dealt with the Kurds back in Desert Storm days. I was Secretary of Defense when we were doing Desert Storm. One of the things we were able to do then was to bring in an American division down through the northern part of Iraq and so forth. And the Kurds were very helpful in all of that. I got to know them well, visited their territory a couple times on my own. And I like them. They're superb friends and allies in the United States. It's noteworthy, for example, that they've lost some 11,000 of their own fighting alongside Americans in going after ISIS and the radical Islamic groups. The president obviously announced recently that he was going to back off the border with our forces. We don't have large forces there, but they're really good ones. And that would enable Turkey to move into the Kurdish territory. I've got a real problem with that. I think that's a mistake. I've supported President Trump in 2016. I didn't get involved in the campaign, but I said I would support the nominee of my party, and I have. I voted for him. Just a few weeks ago here, I co-sponsored with another friend a big fundraiser in Jackson Hole, where we live. Part of the money going to the presidential campaign, part of the money to the RNC. So I'm a supporter. I don't agree with him on everything, but this one really concerns me because it does raise questions about our understandings with our allies. We've got people all over the world that count on the United States, and that's been a key part of our strength over the course of the last 75, 80 years, starting with World War II and up to the present time. I did hear today that, and of course things are moving fast, so I can't vouch for it tonight, but that the president had said he was willing to meet with the Democrats on the Hill, and if they would have a vote on this question of whether or not there would be an inquiry of impeachment, and if they could find some way to negotiate out a process that was fair to all. I hope they can do that and we'll move things along. But in the meantime, I'm really, really hoping it'll reverse course, because I think it's major, major damage, not just our relationship with the Kurds, but with an awful lot of other people look to the United States for their safety and security. And that's been a role we've played since World War II. It's been very good for us. It's been very good for the rest of the world. And I hope we can get it sorted out.
In the last month, in particular, thinking about the week of September 11th, I was, since then, I've been both in Washington at the Pentagon and was back at the memorial at the site of the World Trade Center. And it dawned on me, this year in particular, that any person in America who, after September 11th this year, was still a minor, was born after 9/11. And I would imagine, looking at this audience here tonight, thinking about students here, even if you were born after that. I've got one of my sons here. My sons, Matt and Alex, are 25 and 24, so a couple years older than some of the students here, but not much. Matt and Alex were just in elementary school. I imagine some of the freshmen were just babies at the time. And one of the things I think is really important, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is not only from just a purely historical standpoint to know what happened, but I thought on that day how important it's going to be going forward to remind people not just what happened, but who did that to us and why they did that to us and why we need to do more than remember, but be vigilant about that, because it didn't happen by accident. It wasn't just an accident that day. It certainly happened, and you were about as close as you can get to understanding what was happening and what the appropriate response was.
Well, it's one of those days that we still mark it every day that 9/11 goes by. At the time, I was vice president, and it was our first year in office. The day before, I'd been down in Kentucky, I think with a bunch of governors. And then on that particular day, as a Tuesday, as I recall, the president had gone to Florida and was doing an education function down there. And so I went to the office. Usually he and I would both meet in the Oval Office and have our first meeting of the day. It was to get our CD brief from the CIA, PDB it was called, President's Daily Brief. That day, because we were in different places, I just read it by myself. But then I was in my office and working on a speech with my speechwriter in the West Wing. And then my secretary rang in and said that an airplane had just hit the World Trade Center. That was just the first word that came in. I turned on my television set, and as my speechwriter and I were sitting there watching, we saw the second plane go in and hit the World Trade Center. We knew then that this had to be something that wasn't an accident, obviously. It was a terrorist act. I talked to the president on the phone down in Florida, expected to put together a brief statement for him to issue. And my office began to fill up. Connie Rice, her office was right next to mine in the West Wing. Josh Bolton came in, he was the deputy chief of staff. Scooter Liddy was my chief of staff. He came in. I ended up with 8 or 10 people in my office. And then all of a sudden my door burst open and my lead Secret Service agent came in very rapidly. Came around behind my desk, put one hand on the back of my belt, the other hand on my shoulder, lifted me up and propelled me out of my office. I didn't have any choice. I was going praying for it. After we got out of my office and down the stairs into the basement in the West Wing, there's a tunnel there that runs from the Situation Room, which is where the NSC meets and so forth in the West Wing. And that tunnel goes all the way across under the White House over to the POC, the President's Emergency Ops Center, which is on the east side. It was built during World War II, and it was about that long. When I got down into the tunnel before we got over to the east side, the doors closed and separated out of room, and my detail, Secret Service detail, was gathering there. And they were passing out weapons and gas masks and so forth in the hall. Nobody knew for sure what was going on. While I was there, the agents told me that they received a word from the control tower out at Dulles Airport, west of town, that there was an airplane believed hijacked, headed for Crown. That's code word for the White House. In other words, it was coming at us. Now that turned out to be American 77. It made a big circuit over the city and then went into the Pentagon and hit the Pentagon. And at that point, I got on the phone again, talked to the president with a strong recommendation that he not come back. Not only was New York under attack, but so was Washington. The Secret Service made the same recommendation. He didn't like it. He really wanted to get back where the action was. But it was very important that we not bunch up in case they hit the White House and take out both of us. One of the things that kicked in that morning was something called the Continuity of Government Program. And this is a program that was set up back in the 80s. And basically what it is, we had teams organized so that in the event of a global war with the Soviet Union, that we could put together these teams. They were already organized, working together and so forth. assigned to one of the presidents, somebody in the line of succession, the speaker, the president pro tem, the Senate, cabinet members, and so forth. Now, I've been the leader of one of those teams, undercover, so to speak, but back in the days when I was still in Congress. And training kicked in some that morning. It was something we trained for that was far worse than what we were actually experiencing on 9/11. But one of the things that was, for example, I immediately focused on how do we get Denny Hastert, the speaker, out of town. We got him out to Andrews and then airlifted him to a secret site west of Washington. So there was a lot of that sort of thing going on. We spent the morning in the PIOC. At one point there, we had another plane reportedly headed for Crown. I was asked if our people were authorized to take it out, and I said yes. I talked with the president before when we were going back and forth about rules of engagement for our fighters if we could get them scrambled. And I'd gone to the president and recommended that he authorize that, and he did. And that's the plane was United 93. And for a while we thought we'd shot it down. We went down in Pennsylvania. Turned out, of course, the passengers had taken over and took it down before we could ever get a plane here. It was that kind of a day that seemed to go on with amazing problems. We had a lot of false reports of aircraft coming in. We banished all traffic coming into the United States. We ordered all aircraft travel, and then everybody had to go down. That was the only way we could separate out the good guys from the hijacked aircraft. Norm Mineta showed up. Norm was our Democrat, as chairman of transportation, Secretary of Transportation. He was in charge of the Federal Aviation Administration, and he had a list of 6 aircraft with their tail numbers that for a while we believed had been hijacked. In the end, the day was traumatic for everybody who was involved. The president eventually got back that afternoon. He'd gone to Offutt Air Force Base outside Omaha because it's probably one of our very best global communications and so forth. And then we had a meeting of the National Security Council that night. My wife, Lynn, and I flew off the south lawn of the White House fairly late in a presidential helicopter going to Camp David. That was our secure, undisclosed location where we spent a lot of time in the months ahead. And landed up at Camp David, and the Secret Service brought grandkids out as part of the family and sort of kept us all together. They also brought our big yellow lab, Dave. Dave was a family dog, great dog. And Dave was moved in, and the Secret Service moved Lynn and I into Aspen Lodge. That's the President's Lodge. Nobody stays in Aspen except the President, except on an occasion like this. And it was the most secure, the safest, the best communications and so forth. So the Secret Service put us there, and they also put Dave there. And so Dave and my family, we spent a couple of days there. Later on that week, the president came up for a weekend meeting of the National Security Council. Dave was still there, and morning, I got early one morning, went down to Laurel Lodge, which is where the dining hall is. I had Dave with me. We walked into Laurel Lodge. There were a couple of cabin wives there eating, but all of a sudden, Dave spotted Barney. And Barney is a little black Scotty. He is a mean, nasty creature. He didn't like anybody. We used to have people come visit with the first family upstairs in the residence, and then they could stop in the doctor's office on the way out and get patched up. Barney did him. He's that kind of dog. The president loved him. He got special treatment. But while I'm down at Laurel Lodge with Dave, all of a sudden I hear this voice. What's going on there? It was the president. Grabbed a donut, fed it to Dave, got him out, got him on the golf cart, got back up to the lodge and then stayed. And about 15 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. It's the camp commander in his navy blues, the Navy captain. He said, sir, he said, no further notice, your dog Dave is banished from Laurel Lodge and from Aspen Lodge. Now, I knew what we'd done in Laurel Lodge, I'd been there, but I didn't understand what the ban was on Aspen Lodge. Well, it turned out that when the president arrived with Barney at Laurel Lodge the night before, and he put Barney into the lodge in Aspen, Barney started sniffing around, looking for and finding he could smell Dave. Dave hadn't done anything wrong, he's been a big yellow lab. But every place he could smell Dave, he marked. And the president never said a word to me about it, never mentioned it. But Dave, you know, he was on borrowed time. And he'd been chasing Barney around Laurel Lodge. It was a traumatic experience. So there were moments of laughter, but it was a remarkable day. We lost 3,000 people, more than we lost at Pearl Harbor. And we'll go down in history here. We talk about it all night. I don't want to take up all the time, but we're still living with the consequences of that now. We were successful within that 7.5 years that we were in office. We were able to avoid any more mass casualty attacks against the United States.
Well, an incredible day. I know some of my friends just up the way here in Janesville talked about hearing the sonic boom of the F-16s flying from the airfield in Madison flying down to Chicago, because not knowing what was going on. And actually, briefly during that time, the president's father, the 41st president of the United States, was grounded at Billy Mitchell International Field in Milwaukee. So, an unbelievable day. We've now got a number of questions. I'm going to rifle through these rapid fire so we can get to as many as possible with the top of the hour. One you kind of alluded to, but I think they're looking for a broader answer than your original reference. And question one is, what are your thoughts on the current impeachment inquiry?
Well, it's a very serious proposition. It's happened rarely in the history of the country. Of course, Andrew Johnson was impeached but not convicted back in the 1860s. Bill Clinton, the one that I'd been closest to before was what happened at Watergate. And say after, I've been out in the private sector after the 72 election, but when Watergate occurred, or when President Nixon resigned after he'd been, it looked like he was going to be convicted. Then I went back to the White House the day Jerry Ford took over and went to work eventually as his chief of staff. It's very, very serious business, and it has happened very rarely in history. And I think there isn't sort of a fixed standard. It's true that basically high crime and misdemeanors pretty much whatever the House says it is. We're to the point now where, say I heard earlier today the president say that he was willing to contemplate working with the House on the issues that have been raised, and but only if the House would pass a resolution, and then pass a resolution, and then work out a process that he thought was fair and equitable. That may be a glimmer, but there's a possibility of beginning to put something together. There's no question about the seriousness of it. It is a political issue. The nation deeply divided on it, just about evenly divided now in terms of the extent to which the public supports it. I don't know what's going to happen, obviously. It's important we get it resolved, and it's got us right now sort of where that's all anybody's thinking about in Washington. Everybody spends all day long dealing with that set of issues, and nothing else is getting done. And so I hope they can get it resolved shortly. I'd like to see before me to find a decision on whether or not there ought to be impeachment. I'd like to see the record and at the this stage, I don't think we've seen it all yet by any means.
Yeah, I think part of, as you alluded to, part of the issue the president raises, and the point you raised now and earlier, is it's an unusual process in the sense that normally you have a vote of the House to move forward on this. You don't have that, so it's kind of no man's land in terms of not knowing what the circumstances are and not being able to see what the information is. Certainly things that normally would be provided to someone else in a situation like that. And as you said, seeking over to affect other things.
And I think the House ought to vote, and that's important. The President's right to be critical of the fact that they have not voted, they're just sort of winging it. But I'm sure these are very difficult propositions for anybody. It's not a clean shot.
Next question up from the audience is, what is your stance on climate change? Should there be government action taken?
I'm very concerned about climate change. Was involved in the oil industry at one time. I ran Halliburton, energy services company. I think it's important for us to remember that a lot of what we're talking about here has really transformed our economy and moved millions of people out of poverty around the world. But there's no question there are consequences to that. I think it's increasingly obvious that there are things happening to our environment because of our reliance on fossil fuels. And we need to work to see what we can do to minimize the impact. I think there'll be a lot of debate on it. I get a little upset because I used to be in the industry when I see somebody who's pushing dealing with climate change because they don't want anybody else out there producing fossil fuels. I think that's not the best way to proceed. We need to have a very broad gauge set of policies to do everything we can to minimize the impact on the environment. I think there are groups that would use everything they could with the climate change argument to shut down large parts of our economy.
Well, and you're right in the sense that I'm often find it interesting that many of the people promoting some of these ideas largely exclude nuclear, even though nuclear has a very small carbon footprint, but one might argue that's for political reasons, even though it's got a much larger capacity to deal with the demand that's out there versus some of the other alternatives.
It does, but I also was on the subcommittee that investigated the meltdown at 3 Mile Island, my first term in Congress. And I once also visited Chernobyl, which was not smart, but it was shortly after the meltdown in Chernobyl. I think you got to be careful of the fact that that's very potent stuff. I'd use more nuclear, but you've got to have, I think we do a much better job of it than the Russians do.
And in particular, the way our Navy's done it over the years, and so many of our submarines, where they've been quite effective on that. Third question is, what are your thoughts on the conflict between Hong Kong and China? Another one of those interesting subject matters where it kind of crosses over political lines, and certainly raises, I think, a larger question about socialism and communism, and where does it end up? I think we've got a real-life example of what's happening in Hong Kong right now.
Well, I've visited Hong Kong a few times over the years. I love it. It's a great city, fascinating part of the world. I'm concerned that the situation that's developed now there in Hong Kong, relationship with the mainland, there's a well-done agreement that was worked out, and I think signed up to by everybody. And I would hope the Chinese would adhere to that mainland and not try to go back on that. I don't know what's going to happen. Our first year in office back in 1989 when I became Secretary of Defense, of course we had to deal with the problems in China again then. And at that time we ended up losing an airplane and a lot of people. Taiwan also was a place where it sort of lives under that shadow on a continuous basis. I used to deal with them. I sold them a lot of F-16s over the years so they could defend themselves. When we did that, we had to take special precautions. They'd only meet with us in the Army-Navy Club in Washington. They wouldn't go to the Pentagon. And so there were steps taken to try to keep the mainland relaxed. But both Hong Kong and Taiwan obviously in positions where potentially vulnerable if the mainland Chinese ever decide they want to move in. There really isn't much to stop them. I would hope we could at least take a fairly strong position, ethical position at least, and then make it clear to the Chinese that we expect them to live up to their agreements.
Well, and a lot of interesting things going on. I remember having to pay a visit when the Dalai Lama was coming to Madison. He's actually got an exceptionally large following in and around the Madison area, and had asked to see me. It wasn't even a public appearance. Didn't go to one of his events, just privately met with him before going off to another event. Somehow the Chinese government got word of that, and a delegation that was coming to look at agriculture in Wisconsin landed in Chicago, got back up on a plane, and went back to China just because, and again, wasn't endorsing the Dalai Lama, just merely meeting with him, and yet it had that kind of an impact. So in many ways it doesn't surprise me when I see what's happening with those who are not just freedom fighters in many ways in Hong Kong, but who are making the point, as you just did, that an agreement was made as part of the transfer of the United Kingdom as to what was going to happen and how the government was going to be set up. And I think understandably, a lot of people are wondering why that's not happening the way it was laid out.
Yes.
Some others may be wondering too why pro athletes get to protest the United States, but not communist China either. But that's a whole other debate for another time. Next question was, let's see, number 5 here. How do you believe media portrayals of you, such as, I'm assuming they're calling this the movie Vice, will impact your legacy? I'm assuming that's I've seen the previews for it.
That's why I see the movie Vice. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't get paid. Nobody asked me. Sort of the high point.
Did they ask you to consult on VP? No, that's another show that's completely different than that.
I don't go near Hollywood. It's not a good place. Our 18-year-old granddaughter is on the rodeo team at the University of Wyoming, and she was the first of the family to see it. And she called me up all excited. She said, Grandpa, I saw Vice. I said, well, what'd you think? She said, well, it says you're a real badass, and that's cool. What can you say?
All right. I got that to look forward to with my grandkids now. Maybe it'll be a movie about me someday. I don't know. Question number 4, is there a good formula that you have followed for all the difficult, time-sensitive decisions you had to make in your career? Interesting insight.
Repeat that again.
Yeah. Is there a good formula that you have followed for all the difficult, time-sensitive decisions you have made during your career?
That's a good question, and I haven't thought that much about. I don't think there is one particular formula. I'm sure I'm better at it as I got older and had more experience that I learned about decision making. The things that always were important. It was important to get some people around you or somebody you can deal with, good staff, wise individuals who had relevant experience, whether it was an economic decision or a political decision or a security decision. I'm just trying to think of if I ever made a bad decision. I probably did. Somebody might want to bring it up. It helped a lot to stay calm and cool and not frenetic. Don't start tearing your hair out. There'll be enough people around you, and you get into a situation like that, who are uptight, freaked out. It's oftentimes the phrase, and it is very important, especially if you're working for a president, something like 9/11, to remember what you've done in the past. And as I say, one of the things that really helped me on 9/11 was that for years I've been running one of the teams involved in the continuity of government program, where we actually go out, go down someplace and actually practice how we would operate the government and maintain the chain of command if there was an attack on the United States. And they're anticipating a nuclear attack. But that training was enormously valuable the morning of 9/11, just because we dealt with a similar situation, and experience counts for a lot.
The next question is actually about 9/11, so I'm going to skip over it because it's essentially the one I asked you earlier. Question number 7 is, how do you feel the image of the GOP has changed since your time serving as Vice President?
Well, I think it's changed. From my standpoint, I've been a Republican since I voted the first time, back in 1862, I guess. I've watched the party grow and develop over the years. Obviously, it's defined very much by the people who run it, by who our nominees are. One of the things that happens now, I think, is that Donald Trump's dominance of it as a Republican president. He'll set the sort of the outlines of what we expect. It certainly affect the way people look at the party. And in terms of my own situation, one of the things that happened was the vice presidency had been a job. I'll never forget Jerry Ford, who was really my mentor for him. When he was president, and I was a young whippersnapper. He never passed up the opportunity after I got to be vice president. Every time he saw me, he'd say, "Dick, I don't know why you took that dang job. It's the worst job I ever had in my life." And he'd been there 8 months, of course. And then he laughed. He was really proud of the fact that I got to be vice president, but he wouldn't ever have been right up front. And when I was first asked about it, President Bush and Governor Bush first asked me about it, I said, no. I don't want to be vice president, terrible job. And I said no on more than one occasion. Eventually it worked around, and long story, but bottom line was I signed on with an understanding with him that it would be a major post. It would not just be funerals and fundraisers. And he was true to his word. And I did have the privilege of working with him. We went through some fascinating times. The opportunity to serve as vice president under those conditions has meant a great deal to me. And it was generally viewed, not everybody agreed with me, obviously, but in terms of being able to have an impact and play a significant, substantial role as vice president, I think he kept his word.
Well, and then I'm going to jump ahead. I'll come back to a couple of these other questions, but just because it fits in with the last part of your response, this is kind of cute. They noted to me that this question comes from a 9-year-old in the audience. So if you're the 9-year-old to ask this, congratulations. She said, or I should say he or she. It doesn't say if it's he or she, but how did you feel when you realized you were going to be vice president? So you talked about being picked and being in, but the night when, well, I shouldn't say the night when you won, because we all know the night the election occurred, it took a long time. It took maybe December of 2000, when you actually knew that the election was over, that you were going to be the Vice President of the United States. What was the feeling like then?
Well, I have a couple of memories of it. We were living in Dallas at the time. The president was then governor of Texas, of course. I'd had a meeting with him, and this had been going on back and forth for quite a while. Then I went home that night after work. My wife was there and both my daughters. And I said to Lynn, I said, honey, sell the house, I quit my job, we're going back into politics. That was not greeted with a lot of enthusiasm. Daughter Mary had the same reaction. Daughter Liz, who's the politician in the family, and who's now the congressman from Wyoming. Liz was out in the garage painting the yard sign. She was ready to go. In the end, one of the things you see when you're a family in politics is that a lot of people say it's really tough on families, and I think it is for a lot of people. That's never been our experience. And the four of us, when we get together, my wife and 2 daughters, we always end up telling old war stories and talking about the campaigns we've been involved in. and so forth. It helped that we never lost when my name was on the ballot. But it was really, I think that night, when I made the decision I was going to accept the president's offer, this was just before the convention, when it was announced. The night in the long recount, I never had the sense that we weren't going to win. That was just my confidence. But all those times they recounted those Florida ballots, we always won, every time. And by the time we got to the place where the courts announced that we had won, that we were the victors, I had a few weeks or 37 days or whatever it was, and the president already had me working, putting together a transition plan and recruiting people and so forth. So it would have been a disappointment if we lost, obviously, but we operated on the basis that we won, we did win. Every time they recounted, we came out on top. And that was always my sense, even after the election and the controversies.
Well, I was particularly glad to hear you talk about your family, because I know my son Matt's here, their son Alex and Tonette, and I said after the height, particularly of the protesting and recall, instead of pulling us apart, which sometimes anything like that, whether it's an election or not, can pull some family apart. In our case, they pulled us closer. My cousin and his wife are here too. They loved hearing my parents, particularly my dad. He loved, instead of being distraught about it all, just loved the fact that we were in the game, we were getting things done, and he felt by God's grace it was going to all work out, and it did. We've only got about 15 more minutes left before the top of the hour, so I want to go through a couple of these questions rapid fire, if it's all right with you, Mr. Vice President. The next question up is, do you think tariffs will bring about the desired result with respect to China and other major trade partners?
I don't know. I'm basically a free trader. I don't like tariffs. I'm always reminded of Smoot-Hawley and the devastating impact that policy had back in the Great Depression in the early 30s. I think there are times when it's appropriate. I think, for example, there was merit in making the case with respect to China. China had been misbehaving, if you will, as a trading partner, that we're not playing by the rules that we were doing. So tariffs, I think, had some impact there. I think we're at the point now where the president's use of tariffs could be troublesome. That we get into a situation where it begins to have a significant impact on America and on our economy, and we've got a circumstance now where the use of tariffs on American agricultural products is creating a real problem for farms and ranching and so forth. And you can overdo it, and I think we're about there.
Next question is an interesting one as well, because it kind of spans the spectrum. Should big tech companies like Google, Twitter, and Facebook be broken up and or regulated?
I don't like the idea of breaking them up. I'm not sure the government would do a better job. I think some degree of regulation, I think, might be appropriate, but it ought to be carefully considered. It ought to be imposed only after a significant national debate. I think those companies, it's wondrous what they've done to transform the world. And we need to respect that, and I'm not eager to set up a bureaucracy to go manage those companies. The track record of government regulation by our federal government is mixed, to say the least. But I'd argue against breaking them up.
Well, it's a good example too. We talked about China before, but another real-life example to the south, Venezuela. Again, the difference not only in terms of economic policy, embracing socialism, but really policy overall, the difference between freedom versus socialism. I know at the height of the protest against Maduro, you have a government-run system there in terms of access to this type of technology, and they shut it down for a while. It was part of the reason why those pushing back on Maduro weren't able to take the actions they might be in a country that, 15 years ago was one of the wealthiest in this hemisphere, and now I think it's something like 9 out of 10 Venezuelans are living in deep poverty. Next question is, what are your thoughts on President Trump's relationship with the leader of North Korea?
Well, it's interesting to watch. We worked in our administration, when the President and I went in 2001, we had 6 party talks underway with Russia and China, North and South Korea, Japan, and the United States. And it was a time when we were trying to get some progress on the whole question of nuclear weapons. We negotiated for the better part of 6 years, and then the North Koreans set off their first nuclear device in the fall of '06. That was followed about 6 months later. I was visited one day by a gentleman, Meyer Dagan was his name. He was the head of the Israeli Mossad. And he came to see me, and he put color photographs down on my coffee table showing the inside of the nuclear reactor that the North Koreans had built for the Syrians down at Al-Khabar in the eastern Syrian desert. They already, even as they had not yet tested their system, they were already selling it to the terror-sponsored state. That was very worrisome. And I think the problem we've got to deal with overall, that whole danger of proliferation is very real. In that case, I lost the argument. I wanted to go take it out. The president was persuaded to take it to the UN. The Israelis saw that and they went and took it out. So it's taken care of. I wish we could have done us.
Is Russia a bigger threat to America than we've acknowledged?
I think there's no question Russia is a significant threat. So we had a sort of a period there of good feelings. It goes back to late '91 when the Soviet Union went out of business. And of course, not long after that, Putin has not followed the Gorbachev line. If you look at what Gorbachev has done, he's obviously, their economy is not much compared to China or, say, the United States. China's got, I think, the second breaking economy in the world. But his aspirations are, I think, very worrisome. One of the things that concerns me is the fact that President Trump, I don't think he has the same view of Putin that I do. What I see is a KGB colonel. That's what he's always been, that's what he is now. And I worry very much that it's important that we understand that. And sometimes I think the administration isn't as committed to that view as I am.
You mentioned the previous question was about prayer, that was North Korea. What lessons do you think we can see from what happened or didn't happen in North Korea as it relates to what's happening and may happen in Iran?
Well, I'm worried that they're both part of the, be careful how I say this, both of them are, sometimes I think they work together, that the Iranians have benefited from North Korean testing of ballistic missiles. There have been some exchanges back and forth there. I think that Koreans, of course, now have tested nuclear weapons. The Iranians have not that we know of yet, but that the two of them together are in different parts of the world that can have a significant impact depending upon what policies they pursue. And I think there's some evidence that the Iranians were the ones that paid for the North Korean built reactor that was given to the Syrians. So there's a triumvirate there. These are terror-sponsoring states. I think it's important for us. I give the President some credit for being able to put together negotiations with the North Koreans. On the other hand, I'm not sure that based on a realistic assessment of what the North is likely to do. There are a lot of bad actors in the world, and I think it's important that our senior people understand who the bad guys are, and that they get that judgment right.
Got about 8 minutes left, so I'm going to get through hopefully the last few of these questions. What is your advice for a student at Beloit that is afraid to be openly conservative in today's political climate?
It's okay. I don't think there should be an educational institution. Maybe I've got grandkids that have gone to Colorado College, Colorado Springs. It's a fairly liberal school. My kids going through there come out raging conservatives. So I'm not sure what the impact of the institution is on individuals. But the world's a big, large, complex place, and I always found that meeting and working with and spending time with folks who had different views than I did was part of the political process I loved.
Ties the next question. How do you feel about the newest members of the House, such as AOC, Tlaib, and others that are pushing for socialism in America?
Well, I think it shows the depth and complexity of our political system. But for all intents and purposes, anybody can run and get elected if they got the votes and be part of the process. I don't agree with much that they're talking about or saying. It's the same time that was developing in the Democratic Party. My daughter, a woman who after only one term in the House was elected to be chairman of the Republican caucus in the House. She's the highest ranking woman on the Republican side. If they were in the majority today, and she might even be the speaker herself. So I can't be critical of what's going on over on the Democratic side in terms of the younger generation coming along. My daughter's kind of doing the same thing over on the House side.
On a completely different issue, this question says, what are your views on LGBT rights and how they've changed under President Trump?
Well, our daughter Mary is gay. She's married to another woman. They have a family. That's been an important part of our lives. And I think freedom means freedom for everybody. And it's a very important principle and proposition to follow.
Who do you look to in the conservative movement today that gives you hope for the future?
My daughter.
Okay, last couple questions here. Are there some gun regulations appropriate, and how do you go about getting smart gun policies enacted that actually reduce violence?
Well, I think we need to do more than we are right now with background checks and so forth. And of course, we had a period of time there where automatic weapons were outlawed and that ban dropped. I think we can go back and look at some of those things. I'm a gun owner. Believe in the Second Amendment in my home state of Wyoming. I think we have more guns per capita than any other state in the nation. And I hunt every year as well too. But I also think we need to work as hard as we can when we can get agreement on some of those things and make sure they get enforced. The importance with which those rules and regulations are enforced by the firms, the manufacturers, and the retail outlets is very important. And when you look at some of the things that have happened with respect to the terrible incidents where we've had great loss of life, I think we need to work hard to enforce the laws we do have to make sure that we minimize those events.
Last two questions. In all the positions you've held in the government throughout the years, what did you find the most rewarding?
Well, right at the top of the list would be being Secretary of Defense through Desert Storm, the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was a really good time to be there. I tell the story about my military aide was from West Virginia. He was a coal miner. And then he enlisted, he got out, he went and got a commission. He eventually rose to 4 stars. But after Desert Storm, a tremendous outpouring of support for it on the part of the public, we were invited down to the University of West Virginia for a football game. They were playing Clemson. They wanted a decorator or notification or was to myself and to Joe. We got down, they went down in halftime, put us on the field, and then to get off, we had to walk the full length of the football field, and down at the far end were all of the people who had served in Desert Storm, the reservists, the National Guard, the active duty guys from West Virginia. And as we were walking down there, we were chanting something, couldn't quite figure out what it was. Finally, we got down there close enough where we could hear, and they were saying, "Let's do it again, let's do it again, let's do it again." That was the hope of the guys in the football stadium that day, and had that kind of response.
Well, and I know, I didn't see before I got a text from him, but Steve Noss, who's a member of the state Senate from not too far away, actually was in Desert Storm. I remember he got deployed right away early on in his first time, so we appreciate him and any others, not just from Desert Storm, but anyone else who served our country from World War II on, obviously all those before, but not anyone living with us before World War II, but everyone along that way. So here's the last question of the night. I'll give you the last question, and then I'll wrap it up, and thank everybody here. But this is an interesting one. What advice would you give to someone who is walking into their first day on the job as Vice President? Stumped him in the last one, right? Don't let Dave take the place of Marty.
Don't let your yellow lab go near your president, Scotty. Yes, I want to, first thing I want to do is sit down, assuming you had, but sit down to the president, very first thing. And get some guidance from him in terms of what he thinks you can contribute. And I say you probably have worked that before you took the job, but it's important to understand, in my case, I wasn't going to run again. I had a long history of heart disease, and I didn't want to get into a situation where my heart disease would be an issue and keep me from doing future things. So I made a decision sometime before that I wasn't going to run for president. That was important. It changes the whole relationship with everybody else when you're a president, and then you got a vice president who's doing everything he can to get to be president. That gets to be fairly difficult. And but it also, I want to say thank you for the opportunity, and that you're determined to do everything you can to make his life easier. And all he has to do is ask, and we're here to help.
Great advice. Ladies and gentlemen, before I thank the Vice President, I want to thank all of you, to all the students, particularly to the YAF members here. If you want to find out more about YAF, it's yaf.org. Feel free to visit not only about this campus, but others across the country. Not only college campuses, but high schools across the United States. To all the students here, whether you're a YAF member or not, whether you're on the left or right or somewhere in between, to the faculty, the staff, to the board, the supporters, and to all the guests, we appreciate you being here tonight. And I got to tell you, you exceeded my expectations. You must have been listening to Ellen this week. Because for those of you who don't watch social media, Ellen made a clear point that whether you agree or disagree on all the issues, it's good to be agreeable and get along and hear people out. You've been an excellent audience in that regard tonight, whether you agree or disagree with everything we talked about tonight. I hope you saw we took a wide spectrum of questions, and the Vice President, I hope, not only enlightened you, but gave you a new perspective on maybe some of his points of view and others that he shares. And so we thank you all for being here tonight. Let's give, once again, the Vice President, former Vice President of the United States, the Chamber of
Nice to meet you guys.
It was great meeting you. Thank you.
Yep. That's good. Thank you. You too.
Hey, where's Where's everyone else? Because they want to do a group picture.
I don't know.
The YAF